Welcome to This Explainer, brought to you by Dr. Christophe Delong and Kinexa Formation. Let's dive right into the invisible forces at play in bobsleigh. We usually look at sports and just see the physical movement. But today, we're exploring a sport that pushes human physiology, neurology, and engineering to their absolute terrifying limits. It's really a masterclass in how humans adapt to a high-speed survival cell. People love to call bobsleigh Formula One on ice, but is it really? Or is it a pure survival exercise? What does it actually take to survive a 60-second run inside what is essentially a mobile survival cell? As we unpack this today, you're going to see why for the athletes locked inside, it's way less about driving and much more about executing a meticulously controlled survival sequence under extreme physiological trauma.
Here's our quick flight plan for today. We'll start with the sport's history, from tourists to gladiators. Then we'll cover the raw power of the push, the survival tech of the chassis, G-force damage, extreme neural overload at 150 kilometers per hour, and finally, reaching an absolute flow state.
Section 1, From Tourists to Gladiators, the Evolution of Extreme Speed. Okay, it is honestly wild to think that this highly technical aerospace-grade sport was literally born out of sheer Victorian boredom. Seriously, it wasn't the brainchild of some brilliant, isolated engineer. It was actually a marketing challenge. Back in 1864, a Swiss hotelier named Caspar Badrout bet his wealthy British summer tourists a free trip if they didn't enjoy the winter. Well, they came, they got bored of walking around, and they just started tying delivery sleds together. Fast forward a bit to the 1920s, and you had the bobsleighers. These were gentlemen stuntmen who would party all night, sleep for maybe 2 hours, and then race in three-piece suits with champagne still in their systems. It really wasn't until the terrifying Lake Placid Olympic track in 1932 that the world had a massive reality check. People realized, okay, this is no longer a leisure activity, this is a sport for modern gladiators. Section 2. The push, raw power, the critical first 50 meters. Stepping onto the ice today, the entire race is fundamentally won or lost in the very first 5 seconds. Imagine trying to overcome the immense inertia of up to 550 kilograms of dead weight. The athletes have exactly 50 meters to accelerate that massive object to 40 kilometers per hour. And doing that requires 2 completely unique tribes of athletes. You've got the pushers, who are giving 100% of their explosive kinetic power. We're talking massive fast twitch muscles and colossal 46 to 52 centimeter necks. But the pilot, they're actually only pushing at about 70 to 80% capacity. Why? Because the pilot has to save massive amounts of neural energy and isometric endurance. That's the ability to hold their muscles completely rigid under immense strain, which is absolutely crucial for the precision steering that comes next. Now, to transfer an incredible 2,500 watts of power per leg without slipping, the athletes rely on exactly 500 tungsten carbide microspikes on the bottom of their shoes. And get this, these spikes penetrate just 2 to 3 millimeters into the polished ice. Every single ounce of their explosive momentum balances on that incredibly tiny, fragile margin of grip.
Section 3. The chassis, survival and tech. The engineering of the cockpit.
Right at the end of the push, the athletes execute this perfectly synchronized jump into the sled, entering a literal marvel of engineering. The modern bobsleigh boasts a drag coefficient of around 0.12 to 0.18. To put that in perspective, it cuts through the air with significantly less resistance than a sleek aerodynamic passenger car. Every detail is obsessively optimized in wind tunnels, right down to making sure a crew member's head doesn't stick out an extra 3 centimeters. But the most fiercely guarded secret in the entire sport is the blades, or the runners. They account for nearly half of the total performance. It is an alchemy of high-carbon steel and temperature management. Before every single race, teams perform this meticulous 5-step polishing ritual. They take it from a rough 400 grit polish all the way up to a flawless mirror finish, sometimes adding micro grooves to channel melted water, and topping the whole shebang off with fluorinated wax. It's just a complete obsession with marginal gains.
Section 4. G-force and physical damage. The body as a resistant structure.
Once they are inside the sled, the physical role of the crew changes completely. They go from generating violent, explosive movement to a state of pure passive survival. They have to withstand relentless, crushing forces because their bodies literally become structural components of the chassis. In the banked corners, athletes experience up to 5 Gs of centrifugal force. Think about the math on that for a second. An 80-kilogram athlete effectively weighs 400 kilograms for 2 to 3 seconds. And critically, their head, which, with a helmet, normally weighs around 6.5 kilograms, suddenly exerts nearly 40 kilograms of force on their neck.
If those massive trapezius muscles fail for even a fraction of a second, their head violently smashes against the fiberglass walls.
But honestly, G-force isn't even their only enemy. There is zero suspension in a bobsleigh. Absolutely none. So every micro defect in the ice is transmitted straight into the crew's bones at a frequency of 15 to 40 hertz. This violent, relentless shaking leads to a really well-documented condition called bobsleigh syndrome, which involves chronic headaches and microconcussions. To survive it, the crew has to lock their deep core muscles into absolute iron-like rigidity. They're essentially turning their torsos into a biological exoskeleton just to protect their spines.
Section 5. The brain at 150 kilometers per hour. Navigating extreme neural overload. Inside the helmet, the pilot's brain is facing a completely different crisis. The inner ear, the vestibular system, is absolutely screaming. The otolith crystals are being crushed under the G-forces, sending out these massive panic signals of uncontrollable freefall. Yet the pilot's brain must actively suppress those evolutionary panic signals just to process trajectory data. So you gotta wonder, does the pilot actually see the track while fighting all of this? The short answer is, well, not really. At 150 kilometers per hour, normal human visual processing takes about 200 to 250 milliseconds. By the time the pilot's brain actually registers an image, the sled has already traveled another 15 to 20 meters. Normal human vision is simply way too slow to react to what is happening right in front of the sled. Because their vision is constantly blurred by those aggressive vibrations, pilots actually rely on sensory proprioception. It's a term borrowed from aviation known as seat of the pants flying. They literally feel the physical G-forces and the micro-vibrations through their glutes and the soles of their feet. Their central nervous system detects minute slips in the ice way before the eye ever could, which allows them to navigate almost entirely blind. There are actually these legendary stories from the 1950s in Cortina d'Ampezzo where pilots navigated through thick fog purely by listening to the changing pitch of the runner slicing through the ice. Incredible, right?
Section 6. The absolute flow state. From conscious thought to pure instinct.
To survive that final arc of the race, the brain has to bypass conscious thought entirely and drop into a flawless state of flow. If a pilot is actively thinking about a corner, it's already too late. They're going to crash. This is exactly why building procedural memory is absolutely vital. It starts with step 1, the track walk, where they consciously memorize every single centimeter of the course. Over hundreds of runs moving into step 2, this mental map transfers from the slow thinking part of the brain right into the basal ganglia. That's the area handling automatic movements. By race day, they reach step 3, the quiet eye flow state. EEG monitors on elite pilots show their prefrontal cortex, the conscious decision-making part of the brain, goes almost completely silent. The body executes microcorrections purely on trained instinct.
Because they are moving faster than they can physically react, the pilot's eyes are locked onto a highly specific target. At 140 kilometers per hour, their eyes are fixated precisely 2 seconds into the future. They aren't looking at the wall right next to them. They're actively reacting to a space in the track that they haven't even physically entered yet, mathematically predicting their trajectory to shave off thousandths of a second. And that leaves us with this final, thrilling thought. It's actually a beautiful metaphor for navigating extreme restricted spaces in our own lives, a concept that's central to the teachings of Kinexa formation. When human and machine blur at terminal velocity, when your brain goes completely silent and your body becomes a hardened shield against physics, are you actually racing the track? Or have you simply mastered the art of surviving the ride? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the limits of what the human body can do.